So ultimately, the message is the biggest differentiator of a firm is your people. And beyond that, why your people stay with you.
I'm Brannon Poe, and this is the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast, where you can enjoy engaging conversations about mergers and acquisitions and accounting practice management. Listen in on strategies to build a more fun and valuable accounting firm. Welcome to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. I'm very excited to introduce Rob Brown, who is a fellow podcaster. I've actually been on his show, I think, a time or two. And just a little bit about Rob. He actually hosts 3 accounting podcasts with a combined audience of 50,000 people in 153 countries. He is an accomplished expert on influence, reputation, employer brand, talent, career development, personal branding, and executive presence. He's based in Nottingham, or Nottingham, if you're American, the American pronunciation, in the UK, which is the home of Robinhood. Which, by the way, Rob, I don't know if I told you this, but I actually lived right outside of Nottingham in Cotgrave. When I was a kid, my father taught at Trent on a teacher exchange program. So
that's amazing. I know Cotgrave really well, Brannon.
Yes. I lived there in 1981, 1982. So long time ago. But
it's an old mining village.
It is. There were coal mines there when I was there as a child. So
wow, how about that? We go back entwined in our ancestry.
Yeah, interesting. Rob has interviewed over 1,000 guests. He's moderated countless panels and chaired hundreds of international business conferences. He wrote the best-selling book, Build Your Reputation, and had a TEDx talk, The Personal Brand of You, which has been viewed over 400,000 times on YouTube. He's a stroke survivor, a committed Christian, and black belt in kickboxing. He plays chess and backgammon and loves orange chocolate and is allergic to grapefruit. That's one of the most interesting bios we've gotten on the show.
Well, it probably speaks to the fact that I'm not an accountant, and accountants are not known for their anti-boring nature because they're all pretty staid and technical. But I'm a former high school math teacher, so I do know a bit about the numbers. But yeah, certainly I've lived a little bit in my advanced age. So the longer you live, usually the more colorful stories you've got, Brannon.
Yes.
Like yourself.
Well, perfect. Well, how did you get into, running 3 podcasts and becoming kind of in this niche? How did you get from a math teacher to this?
Well, I did a few years teaching in Hong Kong at an international school, and then a few years in the UK. But I found that I was coaching, in fact. I was coaching kids to pass tests. It's just the way the education game went, and it ceased to become teaching, Brannon. So I looked at the route out of teaching. But you think, what are you good for? Because you're quite institutionalized as a teacher. You're fit for disseminating information to young children. And as much as that's an honorable profession, it changed for me. So I took a master's part-time in human resource development and thought I'll go into training and development. And I fell into a training role with the guy that taught people how to network. And he was an ex-Baker Tilly accountant, and he knew that world. So he worked with bankers, accountants, lawyers, technically super smart people, but often struggle with the selling themselves, networking, asking for referrals, selling themselves. And I did some associate work for him and found that I was good at it. And I started my own business soon after that. You know, sometimes when the protege becomes the mentor and you overtake your master, and it was a little bit like that. He was a bit older than me. And so for 20 years, I ran a business development training company, and accountants were the niche that I found most traction with. Great people, very smart, very caring, want to do a great job, passionately looking after their clients, struggling a little bit with the conversational and the social side and selling themselves, but they all had to win business and create opportunities for the firm. And then in 2016, as I'm doing this and doing well, I had a stroke, a brain hemorrhage, which was very sudden. And it took me out of the game. Now I've lost some vision. I'm not allowed to drive.
Mm.
I take medication for epilepsy, but that's controlled. But when you have things like that, you'll appreciate it. It's that fork in the road. You've got to recalibrate your life. Now, I'm still in the game, but I'm able to do less than I used to do. And I'm thankful that I can still work. However, that was the point at which I decided I needed to say no to a lot of things. And I went all out for accountants because there was one firm in the UK I was working with that were very loyal to me throughout my rehab. And so I started a podcast soon after that because this was me deep diving into one particular sector. And I realized that I didn't have the credibility, the influence, the authority, the connections that I needed to really make my mark. So I started a podcast. And my thinking was, I'm just going to interview the most famous people I can come across, people like you, Brannon, that have been doing this a long time, and asking them about the accounting world and what is going on. And that launched me into the Accounting Influencers podcast. I was doing it on Skype back then. I don't know if you remember how early Skype was, just on audio.
Yes. I used to use Skype too when I
There you
first
go.
started. Yeah.
And then Zoom came along, so it grew from there. But yes, that is my game now. I interview people and I report on the stories and give some insight and commentary. And I suppose I've become an influencer in that regard because you interview so many people, you get so many insights and perspectives. It's not just your own. You're really good at that and you share those. So that's the role that I'm in right now. And particularly, I help accounting professionals to increase their own influence so they're more impactful, they're better thought leaders, they put their opinions out there, they've got the confidence to create, showcase their domain expertise. So I interview them and turn that into video snippets and articles for them because, accounting types, they hate being on a camera. They're not comfortable with writing articles and thought leadership pieces. So I do that for them. And that's an offshoot of our Accounting Influencer podcast.
Interesting. Well, what an amazing career path and story that you have. And it's very, very touching. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's an interesting road that you have traveled.
Well, it shapes us, doesn't it? It definitely shapes us, the road that we've been down, and everybody's got a story to tell. And indeed, I encourage accountants. If I had a crusade for the accounting profession, it would be that we can all tell a better story. You don't have to have gone through a tragedy, but if you're going to ask me what's the biggest challenge accountants are facing right now, I believe it's the brand of the profession.
Yeah, I do think we have an image problem, and that's which is causing the talent shortage, which kind of prompts my question here about. I want to talk a little bit about talent because I feel like I talk to a lot of accountants who have somewhat not promoted. They don't promote themselves or they don't involve themselves in thought leadership activities because they have more business coming in than they can handle. Right? They feel like they're overwhelmed, they're overworked. So I want to talk to you about okay, how can these skills that you're trying to help people with, how does that translate into attracting and keeping talent and building that compelling employer brand? Like how does that benefit accountants in that regard?
Well, let's go back to the accounting firm as an entity and ask the question, what separates one accounting firm from another? The topic of differentiation. You interview so many accountants, Brannon, and you will go on websites and you'll see them all saying the same thing with the same values and the same colors and the same branding and the same fonts and the same values and the same about us page and the same service lines and features and benefits and promises and everything else. And it's really difficult, not just for clients to discern the difference between the good and the great firms, but for talent to do the same. If you are looking for maybe a forever firm, if you're transitional and you've been around a long time and you're looking for a firm that you can end your days with, or a firm where you've got some more meaning or influence or authority, or you're part of something, or you're building something, or You're passing the baton on as a legacy to the next generation, or you're starting out. You're coming out of university, or you've got a qualification and you're looking for a place to land that will suit you, your personality, your skills. Then you've got some tough decisions to make, because you look at all the messages out there about come work for us or come and be a client of ours, and it's just noise. So when you say, well, why is it important that accountants and firms brand themselves? I'm not talking necessarily about corporate brands and a really good logo. I'm talking about a story that people can buy into. And the biggest and best tellers of stories are the individuals themselves that are in the story, the characters. So one of the most compelling things about an employer brand, and that a corporate brand attracts clients, an employer brand attracts talent. It says, this is a great place to work, and here's why. And here's why our people have stayed so long, and here's why people joined us, and here's what it's like working here. Now, firms don't do that very well. They don't focus on employer brand. The best advocates for the brand of an employer are the people in there themselves. So I've done a series of interviews with people to talk about why their firm is the go-to firm, why somebody should go and work for them, and what it's like working for them, and what kind of leader they are, and how they manage their teams, and what culture means in their firm, and why they're just a little bit different. And you need, with that, to get beyond the fruit bowl and the unlimited time off or whatever it is, all these kind of gimmicks about trying to differentiate themselves. And ultimately, it comes down to, as a talent prospect looking at your firm, I want to see somebody like me that tells a story I can relate to. So if you work for an accounting firm, Brannon, and I'm seeing you putting your personal brand out there and telling you stories about your domain expertise and the kind of work that you're doing and why you love your job and why your firm's a little bit different, I would look at that and think, that this guy sounds like me. This guy sounds like he's on my wavelength. He's speaking my language. He understands my situation. I'll give you an example. There's a guy called Herschel Frierson that I interviewed a few years ago. He's a partner at Crow. And he, back then, I'm not sure if he is now, was the president of the National Association of Black Accountants, NABA. And I said to him, what was it like coming up through the ranks? He said it was a problem, Rob, because there was nobody like me. There were no black accountants. And you could insert your own disenfranchised entity there, like women or Hispanics or gays, or put anything you like in. You want to see people like you, or people where you want to be. And that means a story. You've got to create a narrative around that. And the best narratives come from individuals. It's not from a brand. This is our firm. It's from an individual that's authentic, that's real, that's got some personalization about it. So ultimately, the answer to the question, why should accountants brand themselves, is that it's great for business, it's great for the firm, it's great for attracting talent, it's great for creating a story around your firm that just sets you apart, differentiates you in the marketplace for talent and for clients, and just says this is a journey that's worth coming on with us.
Yeah, and it takes some courage, I would think, too, to put yourself out there and tell a story that's authentic. And sometimes that means sharing things that you might not be, always willing to share. I think it takes a willingness and a courage to tell your story. Well, certainly, it takes. The first thing is, what story am I going to tell? What am I going to talk about? Because accountants fall into that trap of, my work should speak for itself. I'm a technically strong accountant, so that should speak volumes about why this is a great firm and why people should come and work for us. But that's a dangerous myth, because everybody's saying the same thing. And the hidden career tax, as we say in my game, of being invisible in the profession, is you lose relevance. You lose traction, you lose impact, you start to blend in rather than stand out. So we've got to understand that expertise alone doesn't help accountants and firms stand out. It does need some courage. You're right. You've got to start thinking about what am I good at? What, as an individual, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? What wrongs do I want to right? What myths do I want to bust? What do I want to be seen commentating on?
What do
Hmm.
I want to own a narrative on? What domain expertise do I want to talk a little bit about?
Yep.
And yes, it takes some courage because you might have to turn on your webcam and record something or get your phone out, or you might need to do an interview or write an article about something and you don't know where to start. And that's where I come in with my clients in interviewing them and doing that for them. But yes, you've got to be bold, you've got to be courageous, you've got to want to put yourself out there for your own personal brand and that of the firm. And honestly, Brannon, you'll know this. A lot of accountants are not up for that. They don't want that. They love the accounting work. They love the technical side. They say, lock me in a dark room with a spreadsheet and the numbers, and I'll do that stuff. And I'm great at it. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to be a face of the firm. I don't want to put my thought leadership out there. I don't have any particular opinions on things. I just love the job. And that's completely legitimate. But expertise alone doesn't help accountants stand out. It doesn't help them tell a better story about why accounting is a great career to move into.
Hmm.
It keeps it all behind closed doors. So ultimately, the message is the biggest differentiator of a firm is your people. And beyond that, why your people stay with you.
If you own a CPA practice, you're no stranger to the grind. It's easy to get so buried in work that you lose sight of the bigger picture. Oftentimes, in order to improve, we need to change our point of view. Accounting Practice Academy by Poe Group Advisors gives you that fresh perspective, so you can achieve success on your terms. This virtual workshop gives you the tools and mindsets to grow your bottom line and make your firm less owner dependent. You'll use your firm's data to zoom out and see your challenges and opportunities with amazing clarity. Most APA members come to realize that pruning their clients and doing less will actually generate more income. Poe Group Advisors has sold hundreds of accounting practices. We know that the firms that are the easiest to operate are also the most valuable ones in the marketplace. APA is the only workshop built from that mergers and acquisitions perspective, which means our members build more valuable practices. Create a better practice for you and your employees to enjoy, or build it to sell. The choice is yours.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of ways that people can get their voice out in the world. What are some, what are some ways that people can build influence in that personal brand? Maybe that you haven't mentioned. Anything come to mind that helps people really get their voice out there?
Well, let's think about the shop window for accountants. Where are they seen? And there's two, really. If I want to see Brannon Poe, the accountant, if you're out there, then I'm either going to go to your About Us page on your website where you'll have a presence. And by the way, that's an area on a website that talent go to very quickly. And they're often disappointed because it's very two-dimensional. There might be an image, a photo of you. There might be a bit of text. This is Brannon Poe. He's part of our tax department. He's been with us 4 years, and he does CrossFit and war reenactments on the weekend, and he lives in Milwaukee with his 8 kids, whatever it is. But it's just, and he graduated here and he's an expert in these areas. But that's on every single firm website. So that's one of your shop windows is your About Us page. The other one is probably LinkedIn. Let's forget the other socials because accountants generally don't play for business on Facebook or Insta or anything else. That's a really way out there accountant running their own firm with a very entrepreneurial mindset. So LinkedIn becomes your other digital shop window. So when you ask how can accountants build a personal brand, they cannot afford to be a well-kept secret. They need to think a little bit more about their About Us page and about their profile on LinkedIn to say, is this consistent with who I am and who I want to be? And you're looking at 3 pillars of a strong personal brand. You want visibility. It's no good being a well-kept secret. Brilliant as you are. You need credibility, which is people believe you. And the way they believe you is with examples of what you've done. And you need some authority as well, which is a track record, some opinions about your areas of expertise and some thoughts and some insights and some implications and some commentaries of what you see going on. And it's how they showcase that expertise without coming across as self-promotional, because accountants don't like that side of it, do they? They're not comfortable in tooting their own trumpet. So there are ways to do it, but ultimately it's every time you speak and every time you write, that's a personal branding mechanism. So what are you writing about? That might come out in a blog, an article, a LinkedIn post, a social piece, something on your website. Or what are you talking about? So you might be out there doing a talk or putting a video out there. Yes, it's self-promotion, but you're also promoting your firm and your firm's domain expertise. But both those shop windows, they're online, Brannon, aren't they? Back in the day, you and I are old enough to remember where you'd have to go out networking with a pack of business cards. And you'd have to go to the networking mixers and the lunches and the conferences and everything else. And that's how you built a brand. That's how people got to know about you. It was word of mouth. These days, you can build a phenomenal personal brand without ever leaving your office. It's crazy, but it's the way it is. So, yeah, there's a little bit of offline and turning up in person, old school, shaking somebody's hand, looking in the whites of their eyes. That's always good because that's relationship stuff. But you've got to be more intentional with online too. So putting your thought leadership out there, putting your opinions out there that showcase your professionalism, your authenticity, your credibility, your domain expertise, the stuff that you're passionate about. It needn't necessarily be in accounting. You might be passionate about women in accounting. 52% of accountants are women, but only 9% of them are in leadership roles. So it could be that. You might be passionate about the brand of accounting. So you talk about why accounting is a great career to be in. And you inspire that next generation. You could be passionate about AI or private equity or tax reform, or it's not necessarily about your skills. It's about your crusade.
Yeah. And I think the people who follow their genuine curiosity find those paths,
That's a great word. Curiosity. Yes.
Yeah. And so no, those are all really good things, and they're all complicated things like building authority, and it can take time. It's not something you're going to just flip a switch and I mean you can start quickly, but it takes time to build that authority and
yes, it does. And you said it's complicated. It's actually not. It requires more consistency.
Yeah.
So many people, we see them do it, Brannon. They'll stick a post on LinkedIn and then for 6 months, there's nothing. And then they'll pop up somewhere else with another completely random thought. And they think that's personal branding, but it isn't. So you do need to be strategic about it and saying, what are the kind of things I enjoy speaking about? What are the things that make my blood boil? What are the things that annoy me? What are the things that inspire me? And you've got all of that going on. And then you can easily wrap 100 stories or articles or comments around that you could put out over the years. So that's been a bit more strategic and then consistent, because personal branding, profile raising is a non-fee paying activity, isn't it? Nobody gets paid to network. Nobody gets paid to write thought leadership. We might get some upside on the results of that if somebody sees it and joins you or comes for an interview or becomes a client. However, it's a discretionary activity. It doesn't go on the billable hour. So you've got to be intentional and make the time for it, even if it's just 5-10 minutes a week. It requires discipline. It requires intention. It requires a bit of courage. It requires some consistency to do it well. And it's only those accountants, maybe I'm talking the top, not the top, but 10% of accountants that build any kind of personal brand that sets them apart even by 1% from all the others out there.
Yeah.
Because most don't want to do it, and a lot can't figure out how to do it without sounding self-promotional or like they're being forced to do it.
I mean, in a way, if it's only a small percentage that are doing it, it seems like ripe for opportunity. Like the people who do decide to go for that probably get really big rewards in the long run, I would think.
You're absolutely right, because the strategy for survival is visibility, and the competition is not fierce for being known for something by a certain audience. We're not talking about here being an influencer, an international influencer. We're talking here about becoming prominent in a niche, in a business community, in a particular area, in a particular demographic for a particular thing. So you've got to pick a lane. You've got to think about who your audience is. Who do you want to be known by? Who do you want to be seen by? Who do you want to be on the radars of? That's part of a personal branding plan, because you don't want to be everything to everyone. That's impossible.
Right.
Your content would have to be so generic and bland that it wouldn't hit the mark. So you've got to be, to your point earlier, courageous, bold in saying, I want to talk about this stuff and I want to go deep with this stuff. I know a guy that's building a brilliant personal brand, Chris Johnson, right now, and he only does 401k audits. But boy, is he grabbing that niche by the scruff of its neck.
Yeah.
And commenting on the ins and outs of that as he builds his firm. And he's got AI weaving into that. And he recently offered $50,000 as a sign-on bonus for someone to join his firm.
Wow.
Now, that kind of thing's unheard of. It's very counterintuitive and it's extremely bold, but he got some great press out of it. But he was so looking for the right fit for his firm that he was willing to do that and invest long-term in the people he was taking on. So, yes, there are benefits to doing it, and there's not much competition to doing it. And even if there are, 10% of accountants might still be hundreds of thousands of accountants across the planet. However, how many are talking about your niche, your domain expertise, your sector, your area of specialty?
Yeah.
There are so many ways to carve up a story where you can go really deep with it and become that standout voice of authority in that area.
Yeah. I want to shift a little bit towards change. And one thing I'll mention is, I think the biggest obstacle for people to change, maybe the biggest obstacle to focus on their personal brand, like the conversation we're having today, is a lack of capacity to time. And not only does it take courage to share your story and to focus on these things, but it takes courage to say no to the things that are basically getting in the way of you building the practice that you want. And I think saying no to things is often the very thing that starts you on a path towards change. You've got to create that capacity in order to create change, because, in order to devote yourself to something that takes a consistent effort, that takes a consistent focus, you've got to free yourself up first. And I find that that's usually the biggest obstacle that I see accountants facing.
That's very insightful. You're absolutely right. When we talk about the state of mind of current accountants, or even the state of the profession generally, we would use phrases like frazzled or overwhelmed or overloaded or bombarded. And there's so much accountants have to think about beyond all the regulatory change and legal implications and the political ramifications of Trump coming in and all of that stuff, that clients' expectations are ever increasing. And what clients thought was good yesterday is only average today. Yep. So there's all of that going on. And then, I'm super busy. I've got busy tax season. I've got deadlines. And then you expect me to spend half an hour a week writing stuff that I'm not going to get paid for. It's not going to add to my revenue targets. Why should I do that? So to your point, Brannon, it's a longer term play, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not let me be famous tomorrow. It's let me play a longer game so that I'm going to be famous for whatever that means in 6-12 months time.
Yeah. You got to get off the treadmill first. That's the first step, is you got to get off the ever increasing speed of the treadmill.
Have you heard the story about the Chinese emperor back in the day? He wanted a lavish garden built, and he said to all of his thousands of gardeners, "This is what I want built. This is how I want it built." And it took them 3 years to work to the plans. And he went to have a look at it once they'd finished it, and he said, "Wait, something's wrong here. I asked for a row of cedar trees to be built down the sides of this path. And they said, Emperor, cedar trees take thousands of years to grow." And his answer was, "Well, we'd better start now." And that gives us that story of the best time to plant a tree is many years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. And the third best time to plant a tree is tomorrow. So you've got to start, even if it's baby steps. And you've got to have some intention, some purpose about it to say, okay, I'm going to give this 3-6 months, or I'm going to devote this to my personal brand and the brand of the firm and my public profile, because I know that just being good at what I do is not going to be good enough. And I know that thought leadership is a game changer in accounting, whether I'm selling me or the profession. It starts with an intention in getting over the overwhelm. But don't we make time for what's important? There's a great quote, Brannon, by a guy called John Maxwell, who's a leadership guru. And he says, say no to the good so you can say yes to the great.
Yeah, exactly. It's those guardrails, I think, that are, for whatever reason, lacking in a lot of firms' management style. Or, I just think that's what you say no to might be more important than what you say yes to. So.
And I ask sometimes who's driving it. So I had a call just before you and I came on this interview with a guy that was in a 30-person firm. He's a partner in a firm in Milwaukee. And he said, I am the sole voice, the external voice of the firm. And I know I need to be more public in my approach. And I said, well, is that coming from you wanting to do that? Or you being forced to do that because of the situation that you're coming into, or somebody's telling you have to do it? Because you know what it's like. If you're doing it because you have to, there's less fun in that. There's less incentive to do that.
Yeah.
But if you really value and see the benefits of being a little bit more public, the increased influence, the increased profile, the increased opportunities, the increased career autonomy and flexibility and choice, the increased power with which you can turn work down because you've got higher quality work coming in.
Right.
That freedom there, these are the benefits. Once you see those, you're more incentivized to say, okay, this is worth doing.
Right. No, I agree.
But I'm going to give something up to do it. I appreciate it. You've not got extra time in your day once you've made that decision. But we prioritize, don't we, what's important? We make a little bit of time for it. And it doesn't need to be hours. You can make a splash with 5, 10, 20 minutes a week.
Yeah. Well, what do you think are shaping the profession right now? What do you see some of the drivers that are really shaping the profession? If we zoom out a little bit.
Well, here's a question for you. Who do you feel is responsible for the brand of accounting?
For the brand of accounting? Well, I think a lot of people want it to be the organizations like the AICPA.
Yeah, the professional bodies. Yeah.
I think that ultimately it's up to the individuals in the profession, and we have to take more responsibility. We have to maybe get more involved with students, that are considering this as a profession. I think we have to do more individually. And maybe we need to get more involved with organizations, our state organizations and our national organizations, so that we have some influence there. But, if we don't like what they're doing, right, we might need to, I think it's just the profession. I think it's a collective effort of everyone. And so I think that's who should ultimately be responsible. I don't know. I've never been asked that question before, Rob. That's a good one.
I welcome to my world. I ask that question a lot, and I get really varied answers, Brannon. Some people like you, they lead with the professional bodies, the state societies, because they're at the top. But what is their agenda? They're after memberships, and they run CPE type stuff, and they've got to look after people's technical status. But the brand of the profession, perhaps. I've interviewed a Corey Ramsey, who was the chair of AICPA, and he admitted that the profession has an image problem, like you did at the beginning. So that is one of the big challenges. But in terms of who's responsible, certainly the state societies, but they're ran state by and large. with their own micro agendas. You've got your big ones like your New York and your Pennsylvania and your California and your others. But to your point, is it everyone's job? The problem with it being everyone's job is that a bit like climate change, people don't do anything about it on an individual basis because they feel everyone else is going to do it. So an accountant says, why should I put out some thought leadership about why accounting is a great career choice? If it's everyone's job, then everyone else should be doing it, and I'm too busy to do it. So yeah, there's an element of responsibility for everyone for the future of the profession, but you and I both know that 75% of accountants are at or close to retirement age. And a lot of them, frankly, don't care what's coming after them. They're looking at an equity pot and a payout and a retirement, and they've been in this game a long time and they're ready to get out. And that's why private equity is easing a lot of that transition for them. Now, some genuinely do care about what's coming after them, and they care about legacy, and they care about the new generation coming through, and they want to keep that going. However, it ultimately comes down to, it is a challenge for the brand. Less people are coming into accounting and taking accounting majors. People are retiring thick and fast out of the game. And even amidst the ranks at senior and junior roles, people are coming out of the profession and going into industry, going into tech, going into doing their own thing, going out of accounting altogether for many reasons. So we could all do a better job. I'm playing my role, you're playing your role. You're amplifying what's great that gives accountants an edge, and some kind of flight plan, some kind of strategy to be better today than they were yesterday. And you're magnificent at that. You're shining a light on what is a good career choice, but you can only do what you can do. So we can all tell a better story.
I mean, I think if you build a good firm, in a way, that's doing your part. If you build a really good firm that offers a good career for people, and you're offering services that help the business community, that genuinely help your clients, then maybe that's your part, and that's enough. That's great, because there's a lot of firms that aren't run very well. So,
but if I challenge you on that, Brannon, I'd say, isn't that what accounting firms are supposed to do anyway? Why is that in any way exceptional? Accounting firms are supposed to run good firms,
but they don't. The thing is like, and everybody can always improve. I believe there's always, even if you're running a great firm, and I've seen a lot of great firms, they can always take it to another level. They can be better leaders. They can be better mentors. They can be better advisors. They can, they can always be, there's always room for improvement. And so
that's great. I love that. You're absolutely right. They can be better in all those roles. And if they do that, they will end up running a better firm.
Yeah.
And that will end up shining a stronger light on the profession as a career of choice. That makes great sense.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid coming up and when I chose accounting, I went to the person that told me to become a CPA was an entrepreneur.
Right.
I was like 17 years old, and I met this guy for breakfast, just ran into him, and I looked up to him, and he was a very successful entrepreneur in our community. He had a lot of different businesses going. And, I asked him, I said, what should I do? I want to learn about business. I want to be exposed to a lot of different businesses so that I can one day have my own business. And he thought about it for a minute. He goes, go and become a CPA. You'll get to see all the different, ways that people run businesses. Now, my guess is he had a good CPA. He had respect for his CPA. And so that's just one example of how a good CPA affected an entrepreneur, affected a young person choosing the profession.
And there are so many good stories like that we don't hear often enough. But you're right, they are game changers. They are, particularly throughout the pandemic, where businesses were trying to keep the lights on. Accountants were superheroes without capes. They were the guardians of business, keeping things going and trying to make sense of all the crazy stuff that was going on. And they were exceptional. But again, they didn't tell that story enough. They didn't articulate well enough Not just that they were making a difference, but how they were making a difference, and ultimately how that was impacting businesses. So work to be done, but a great time to be in accounting, a great profession to shout about. And if accountants, to wrap this up, would just be a bit more intentional about branding themselves a little bit more, about being a bit more vocal, a bit more visible, a bit more out there.
Yeah.
Not a social media tart and a diva and be an influencer. No, just speak with authority and passion about what you're doing and what you're interested in, and that will move the dial.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stories, I like to get a story from our guests if they have something that's kind of maybe a little humorous. And I think you and I talked a little bit before we started recording about your story. And do you want to share that?
Of course. It's not work related, but it's something I'm comfortable now being on the record for. So a few years ago, my wife and I, we've got two lovely daughters, Georgia and Madison. One's married here in the UK. She's 22. The other is studying in North Carolina in criminal justice and really enjoying the US system. She's got a US Marine boyfriend and 12 tattoos. So I don't know who I take to court for that. Is that Trump's fault? Is that your fault, Brannon? Can I hold you responsible? But anyway, she's having a blast. So we got to that point where we decided that we didn't want any more children. So you then come to that conversation about birth control. And I took one for the team and said, I will get a vasectomy. I think you call them that over there. I hope that you do, that the medical translates. So, and I'm terrible with needles. So this was a big deal for me because I knew there would be some cutting and snipping and pricks involved. Pardon me. So, so we went through the process. You have some interviews. People check that, is this really the end? Are you sure you don't want any more kids? This is a very final operation, if you like. And we said, yeah, we'll go ahead. And we were appointed to the one doctor in our whole county that did these exclusively. All he did was vasectomies. And that's the guy you want, isn't it? If you want an expert, you want the guy that only does that. And he does thousands of them a year and he can do them in his sleep. And he's the absolute top-notch surgeon in that procedure. That's the guy you want. So we booked in the procedure, but I got a phone call from him a few days before to say, we've come up against a little problem. There's a nurse that I use in all of my operations and have done for the last 15 years. And she knows exactly what I do so that I'm 100% concentrated in the theater, in the operating theater. The problem is she's your neighbor. And it was a lovely lady called Karen that lived opposite me. And I knew she was a nurse, but I had no idea what kind of nurse she was. But now I find out. So this guy said, look, if you're comfortable using Karen, that's great. But I appreciate it's delicate. She's a neighbor. You might not want to. I can get in a nurse from across town. And I'm thinking, I don't want this doctor to be with a nurse that he doesn't know, that he's never worked with before, performing a very delicate procedure. So I said, listen, give me a few days. Let me talk to Karen. And so I went across the road to Karen and she opened the door to me and said, I've been expecting you. When I saw your name on the roster coming up and your address, she said, I'll be honest with you. It makes no difference to me. It's just a procedure. I've done it thousands of times. And if it's any consolation, Rob, I've also done the vasectomies of Jim at number 47, Gary at number 64, and Trevor at number 42. So and once she said that, I thought, listen, I don't need to be a diva about this. This is just a procedure. She's doing her job. I said, if it's fine with you, Karen, it's fine with me. So we went back to the doctor and said, we'll go for it. So I did, and the moment of truth was when, after the operation, a few days after, when I had to look Karen in the eyes, we're picking up our milk from the doorstep. But the ultimate professional she was, she never mentioned it, and I never mentioned it, and she didn't give me a little wink or anything else like that, even though she's seen me in my most delicate position. So we have a laugh about that now. It was,
it's good that he told you, because I wonder if some of your other neighbors were surprised by that. that
Can
news.
you imagine? Yeah, I never asked that actually, but it is. You're right. It's good that he's professional about it, and I'm sure Karen, the first time it happened, where one of the neighbors on her road came up, she would have had to flag it up as a conflict of interest, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps.
There you go. That's my story for what it's worth, Brannon.
Love it. One more last question before I let you go. Books. Do you have any book recommendations for our audience?
My favorite book of the last few years has been Deep Work by Newport. He's written some great books, but I love Deep Work because essentially the message is that anything you do that's meaningful needs to be distraction free. And you've got to set up your schedule to do that. Otherwise, anything meaningful and of high value is not going to come out from you. And we live in such a distracted, attention diffused world that it takes some effort and some intention to set up your calendar such that if you've got anything meaningful you need to do, and let's face it, it's the meaningful work that counts. If you want to do that, then you need to, and you call it deep work of the highest value, then you need to set up your calendar accordingly. So that has been my book of choice, my go-to, Brannon, for the last few years now, and I've not been able to shake that.
It's a great book. And, we're in an age of more distraction than probably we've ever had to deal with. And so we need to go back to remembering how important that distraction-free time is. All right, Rob, well, this has been awesome. What's the best way for people to follow you online?
I'm a LinkedIn guy, as you would expect, Brannon. It's where I'm most active. It's where I have most of my conversations. So checking out Rob Brown on LinkedIn, the guy in Nottingham, that will come up. And of course, our Accounting Influencers podcast, all of those episodes are helping accountants do just what we've talked about today. How do they be more influential? How do they build more of a personal brand? And we might take a topic like private equity or AI or something else and say, here's what you need to know in your role to have more of a voice. And ultimately, the profession, Brannon, is a fight for relevance. We want to stay relevant. We want to stay front of mind to our clients. We want to be seen as doing a great job. We want to be attractive to the new generations coming in. So our podcast helps us to do that. And my LinkedIn profile, as I said, is the right place to go to.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Enjoyed our conversation today. And I'm sure our listeners got a lot from this.
It's been brilliant, and it's great to meet somebody like you. I mean, we've known each other a while now, Brannon, but to talk about this stuff with somebody who equally cares deeply about this and is playing their part. What you do on your show is tremendous, and you've been doing this a long time and shining a light. So keep on rocking the free world, as we say.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. You can keep the momentum going by subscribing and sharing your thoughts with us. Visit our website at pogroupadvisors.com for more resources, and tune in next time for more exciting conversations like this one.